yourself from
Yeah.
Chowdhury.
Yeah.
Thanks for going there. I just wanted just to say a few things to the brother.
We need to go.
Salam
alaikum.
Like I said to you before, that
one thing I have to clarify though, before you continue. So, Bismillah. So, a lot of things have been said about me in the park. Yeah. Number one, if you look at any, like most of my debates I have in the park, yeah, I always say I'm not a sheikh. I'm just learning the deen. I'm a simple Muslim learning the deen. And I don't follow Andrew Charge, I don't follow anyone. My emir, my leader is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that should be anyone's leader, alhamdulillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters and dear friends. Hope you guys are doing well. Welcome to my show. It's water. Yeah, no refutations, please. Now, as you guys know, I've reached 100,000 subscribers. I've got a special video for you guys, a funny one. You guys would really like it. I'm gonna let you guys see that straight away.
But what it is, yeah, alhamdulillah. Basically, I'm Muslim, alhamdulillah, and I defend any. My thing is, if a Muslim does something wrong, I take them by the hand and I correct them in private. I do not go and berate them in front of the cameras, etc. I do not believe in that. Yeah. And when it comes to Muslim blood, if you look in the media, Muslim blood could spill like water. No one cares about the Muslim blood.
As we Americans sit in our cozy homes with our indoor plumbing and great Wi-Fi, we're constantly subjected to our media telling us it's the war on terror, keeping us that nice and cozy and safe. Especially now with the election going on, fear just sells so well. So this might be a good time to remind everyone that we are the ones killing more people than anyone else on the planet right now, by far. The Physicians for Social Responsibility is an organization based in Washington, D.C. They actually won the 1985 Nobel Peace Prize, and they released a report entitled Body Count: Casualty Figures After 10 Years of the War on Terror. The report takes on the huge task of trying to add up all the people who have lost their lives to our 15-year-old war on terror. And the number they came up with is around 1.3 million people. They report we've killed about 1 million people in Iraq, 220,000 people in Afghanistan, and 80,000 people in Pakistan. They also say these estimates are probably low, as it's really hard for anyone to try to tally, since we keep dropping tens of thousands of bombs. It's nearly impossible to account for every life lost, so the 1.3 million is actually a conservative estimate. It doesn't even take account of everything going on into Yemen, or Libya, or Syria, for instance. The researchers say the real number could easily be in excess of 2 million.
Rather, people care about when the non-Muslims die, when the Muslims are killed. We wanna berate them. We wanna berate the Muslims that did, etc. We wanna condemn, etc. We wanna go on the minbar and the masjid, yeah, to condemn. But when it comes to Muslims, like recently, we found that there's a Muslim girl that was raped and tortured in India, and in Hindu temple. Gaddafi Siddiqui is still in prison. No one talks about this stuff. You know what I'm saying? Because people don't want to be seen as extreme. Yeah. So, because the people in power, regards to the Taghut, to hold on to the power, they have to silence the truth, which is the Muslimin. And the way they silence the truth is by 5 ways. The first way is to leave you alone. The second, which is quite soon after that, is character assassination, which is what we're talking about today. The character assassination is many types, but the main type is to label you and, for example, extremist, a terrorist, a fanatic, and obviously divide and conquer, basically. Divide the ummah, and, that's the character assassination. The other thing they would do is buy you out. So there's one brother, the MI5 came to him and said, look, we'll offer you £220. And the guy was like, come on, man, like, I can get there in an hour. Like, so it's not. Why you offer me this? Like, I'm not someone. I'm not one of these people. So, alhamdulillah, that's what they will do. They'll try and buy you out. They'll offer you a passport. They'll offer you anything. They'll offer you anything that will. And this is their way of silencing you. Obviously, the other extreme is that they'll give you money to spy. But in this particular regard, they just want to give you money to silence you because your dawah so much that they'll come to you and just offer you money just to stay quiet. And I remember when when I was getting released from prison, they just said, as a 15, they said to me, just focus on your family, then just work. That's it. Just stay to yourself. That's it. That's all we want from you. We know who you are. Just stay quiet. And this is how much they fear the dawah. I mean, many people that got arrested recently, their evidence was just like dawah. They were just showing me dawah videos, and I was thinking, subhanallah, this is evidence, like subhanallah, like ajib. But this is the dawah, subhanallah. And number 4 is obviously they will expel you from the land, or they will just simply boycott you. So there's one brother in particular, may Allah preserve him and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him sabr. He can't even work, he can't do any trade, subhanallah. And he's only allowed a certain money a week, and there's many Muslims like this in this country. If they can't leave, then they'll just like leave you here, and they'll just like have a boycott on you where you can't do anything. And if that doesn't work, if you're still carrying on and you're still causing them a thorn in their side, then obviously the 5th is they will kill you physically. And obviously after that, they can't really do anything if that doesn't work.
There are different ways that the government, the police and British institutions can deal with people considered radical. De-radicalise them, arrest them, control them, recruit them, silence them. So what does each involve?
There are a very few exceptional cases in which other measures can be taken, particularly where terrorism is concerned, because it's considered so serious. And I would have said the main 2 are, first of all, an asset freeze, where somebody can actually suffer very serious controls on how they can use their money. And then right at the top of the tree, you've got the terrorism prevention and investigation measures. That's called a TPIM. It used to be called a control order, which can result in a whole range of restrictions, including a curfew. Even the place you live, you can be moved away from your home area. You can be restricted in terms of who you can talk to, the electronic equipment you can use, and so on.
Ricardo McFarlane, 30, allegedly breached an ASBO made in February 2014, which barred him from approaching members of the public in order to promote Sharia law. McFarlane and a group of up to 20 other men are said to have set up a stall outside Topshop in Oxford Street on March 25 last year and called for strict Islamic laws to be imposed across the UK. Mail Online has been forced to pay out £150,000 to a British Muslim family over a Katie Hopkins column which falsely accused them of extremism. A Muslim boy has been quizzed by police after mistakenly writing that he lived in a terrorist house rather than a terraced house. The 10-year-old made the error during an English lesson at a primary school in Accrington, Lancashire, and the following day officers arrived at his home to interview him and examine the family laptop.
And subhanAllah, and even like Paul, Paul, he actually admitted on camera that if you actually say that I don't agree with homosexuality, they actually see you as an extremist. So my question actually was to Ali Dawah, that what is an extremist? You know what I'm saying? Because
they deem extreme people who believe in the Sharia, believe in the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be dominant. there was one case, this family case, court hearing, and the brother, obviously, brother and sister was trying to get the kids back from the Taghut, and the social worker said they're extremists. That was what she said in the court. She said these people are extremists. That's why we took the children. And the judge said, "Okay, give me an example of what extreme is about them." And the social worker, she's a Hindu, she said that these people believe that Islam should be dominant over the whole world. And the judge said, "Yeah, but the Christians want Islam to be, their religion to be over the like." And the judge was just looking at her like, what's so wrong about that? That the judge, because they've been so they're so like polluted with this thought, like that's extreme. They never really thought it through. Like, like there's no problem having that belief. And likewise, the Muslims, we need to realize that there's nothing wrong with saying Islam will dominate the world. There's nothing wrong with saying that we should have an Islamic state.
In the UK.
I promote the Islamic state.
You promote Daesh here. This guy promotes.
Even just the other day, there was an example. One brother called up LBC and he said, "Look, I don't agree with Islamic State. I don't agree with ISIS. They're barbaric and they're not Muslim, but there is something called Islamic State in Islam, and we should have this. As Muslims, we should strive to have this in the entire world." And the guy was like, this Ian Collins guy, he was like, "Yeah, but Islamic State is barbaric." It's like trying to put it down, and the brother ended up like saying things against the Sharia, like against the Hudud. And I was thinking, subhanAllah, like, we shouldn't be afraid to say our deen.
When people speak, when people say words, do they even know what they're saying, subhanAllah? Even there's someone here, I'm not going to say who he is, someone actually came to me and said, "Aki, subhanAllah, Anjem Chowdhury, he's a spy, he works for the MI5. Subhanallah, like, what's wrong with it? Like, just people to speak loosely about Muslims, subhanAllah."
Preacher Anjem Chowdhury has been found guilty of inviting support for so-called Islamic State. Another man was convicted of the same offence.
In short, Chowdhury's offence was not to plant a bomb, or even to facilitate the planting of any bombs. As the BBC account says, if he saw a bomb recipe he wouldn't have known where to start. No, his offence was to be a thinker, it was to ridicule liberal democracy and the rule of law. He has been convicted for, in the BBC's candid but uncritical words, what lurked in his head, his ideas. This should concern everyone who believes in freedom. There was no evidence Chowdhury had organised violent acts or financially supported the Islamic State. Instead, it was revealed that he had sworn allegiance to ISIS in a curry house in East London with his closest aides, that is, he had a sad, bravado-filled but fundamentally private conversation over a biryani. And the prosecution also quoted from various of his YouTube lectures, in which he said things like "We should dominate the whole world by Islam and one day Hackney and Walthamstow will be under Sharia." These are opinions, bluster. He had no plans, and in fact no prospect whatsoever, of making these thoughts a reality. He's being punished for being a fantasist. One of the prosecution's claims was that Chowdhury radicalized people. His lectures apparently turned impressionable young Muslim men into killers. One of the killers of Lee Rigby was a fan of his nutty talks. Others who listened to him later went to Syria to join ISIS. But unless we are going to give up entirely on the idea of free will, then we must argue that Chowdhury is no more responsible for these individuals' behavior than the right-wing, anti-mass migration newspaper columnists cited by Anders Breivik are for his atrocity, or the authors of the Bible are for every mad killing carried out by fans of that good book. Rigby's killers, the trekkers to Raqqa, these people made a free decision. Punishing speakers or authors for what others choose to do upon hearing or reading their words is a dangerous game. Through the idea of radicalization, the notion that apparently passive individuals can be infected with wickedness by the rantings of Islamo hotheads, we're witnessing the rehabilitation in anti-terror terms of a deeply censorious idea of moral pollution. Where the book burners of old wanted to save our souls from moral corruption, today's jailers of the offensive hope to protect minds from the radical germ.
The Crown Prosecution Service said the pair had used the power of social media to try to influence their followers, including the young and the vulnerable. The men were found guilty 3 weeks ago at a trial at the Old Bailey, but for legal reasons the media has been unable to report it until now.
Line. And if you look at his influence and the impact, of course, that was then available to people across the world. And without a doubt, those speeches and the material he posted was used to radicalise others.
I constantly say to people there are no decisions that have been made in relation to Iraq at all, but there is no doubt that Iraq poses a threat in respect of weapons of mass destruction, and there is no doubt that this issue is an issue that should be dealt with. There is no doubt at all the United Nations resolutions that Saddam is in breach of are there for a purpose. He is, without any question, still trying to develop that chemical, biological, potentially nuclear capability.
Met Gaddafi in 2004 after Libya renounced weapons of mass destruction. 3 years later, a meeting between the two leaders progressed the integration of Libya into the international community after years of sanctions. In 2011, Blair encouraged Gaddafi to stand aside. Rebels overran Tripoli that same year, and Gaddafi was killed 2 months later.
And to allow him to do so without any let or hindrance, just to say we can carry on and do it, I think would be irresponsible. Look, I would never support anything I thought was wrong out of some blind loyalty to the US.
To allow Saddam to use the weapons he has, or to get the weapons he wants, would be an act of gross irresponsibility, and we should not and we must not countenance it.
I'm quite sure, I think most people are, that he has these weapons, and that the people in the documentation exist to show that.
And the truth is, this issue of weapons of mass destruction is a real threat to the world. I believe, incidentally, that it is only a matter of time before it is linked with international terrorism. Can we be sure that terrorism and weapons of mass destruction will join together? Let us say one thing. If we are wrong, we will have destroyed a threat that at its least is responsible for inhuman carnage and suffering. That is something I am confident history will forgive.
You know, there's always been something bizarre about the notion that Saddam never had any weapons of mass destruction. I mean, we had a 12-year history with the UN for a reason. As I've said constantly to you, I believe the intelligence we received is correct. The intelligence community throughout, like the UN, like virtually, as far as I'm aware, most intelligence services in the world, certainly did believe that he had WMD, weapons and capability and intent.
And just as I had to accept that the evidence now is that there were not stockpiles of actual weapons ready to be deployed.
The decision I had to take was, given Saddam's history, given his use of chemical weapons, given the over 1 million people whose deaths he caused, given 10 years of breaking UN resolutions, could we take the risk of this man reconstituting his weapons programs? I still believe it was right to remove Saddam. We sometimes forget now what the regime was actually like and the devastation it caused not just within his own country but in the region and the wider world.
I took a decision I thought to be right, but I apologise for the fact that the intelligence we'd received was wrong, but I find it hard to apologise for removing Saddam. I think even from today in 2015, it is better that he's not there than that he is there.
I would take the same decision, if I was back in the same place, with the same information, I would take the same decision. Obviously, that's the decision I believe was right.
Line. And if you look at his influence and the impact, of course, that was then available to people across the world. And without a doubt, those speeches and the material he posted was used to radicalise others.
You know, I believe that a week on, the question needs to be asked, who is really inciting people to murder individuals? Is it Mr. Chowdhury, who's never had anyone part of his organisation who's actually murdered anyone, you see, or who's been done, for example, for trying to murder someone?
But people who say so that because a lot of people that have followed you before are in prison.
No, but while they're part of the organisations, they've never done anything like that. They've never actually murdered anyone, and they've never actually been done for trying to murder anyone. Or is it David Cameron, who has actually incited people to go abroad and murder people? So I think this is a question we need to ask. Secondly, what is the radicalising factor, the biggest radicalising factor? If you mean by radicalisation people who are incited to attack other people, then I think, you know, the government with their own kind of like help for heroes, you know, and we should be so proud of our British forces. The Queen has to mention them in her Queen's speech. You know, he has to go over there to Camp Bastion and wherever to pat people on the back, and yet we find there are tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of innocent men, women, and children being slaughtered. You know, young boys have been slaughtered. They've been shot in the head. Weddings have been bombed. Where's all the condolences from the government for them? I mean, you're so quick to ask the Muslim community to say, oh, we regret what took place last Wednesday, and we're going to lay wreaths and we're going to start regretting everything and send our condolences. But when did Theresa May or David Cameron ever shed a tear for the boys and the men and the women who've been slaughtered, and many of them being sexually abused by British and American soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan? They'd never ever shed a tear. They've never sent condolences. They remember every single one of their own men who've died. But the fact remains that as far as the British government and the American government are concerned, Muslim blood is like water. It can run as long and as much as need be. It doesn't make any difference. But the only real blood is your own soldiers' blood. And I think this is what is going to dawn upon the British public sooner or later. Hang about, our foreign policy is having repercussions back here, and it's not Mr. Chowdhury, it's ourselves, because we're inciting people to go out there and occupy people's land and murder people.
David Cameron led an official campaign to delegitimize and topple Assad. He incited opponents in Syria to fight. He may well have even incited some from the UK to go and fight with the mythical moderate jihadi army. The attempted murder of a former Russian spy is rightly condemned. Yet Britain advocates the execution of its own citizens in the Middle East. It's sheer hypocrisy. In 2015, a British student from Cardiff, Riyad Khan, was killed in Syria by an RAF drone bomb, presumably piloted from Lincolnshire. A House of Commons report later accepted that he was orchestrating and inciting terrorist attacks in Britain, but could not discover how imminent the attacks were or the legal basis for his killing. His British associate, Junaid Hussain, was killed by an American drone. 2 years later, Hussein's widow, Sally Jones, and their 12-year-old son were similarly wiped out. No trial preceded these executions of British citizens on foreign soil. They died by executive action for being a threat to national security. If we assume someone in Moscow took the same view of Russian spies erge scruple, what is the difference?
Said that if the Nuremberg principles were applied, every post-World War II president would be indictable. It's probably true. Can we run down them real fast? What did Eisenhower do that you would indict him for?
Is the CIA an army of individuals who have a license to kill? It's like Murder Incorporated, right?
Oh, are you kidding? The CIA makes the mafia look like a Sunday school class. I mean, this is the problem with what's actually happening in Afghanistan. Look, the CIA has done in this country, what they've done to us is unbelievable. Look at the terrorist acts that have occurred. The CIA behind most, if not all of them. We had the Marine Barracks, Air Embassy in Kenya. We had Pan Am 103. We had the USS Cole. We had Oklahoma City. We had the World Trade Center in 1993. Our government was involved in some of those. I can't say all of them because I don't know, but I do have documentation that there was government implication in some of these. We'll discuss them as we go.
Well, Ted,
The report's titled Body Count, Casualty Figures After 10 Years of the War on Terror. And it outlines that 1.3 million people have died as a direct or indirect result from America's military operations against terrorism. Looking specifically at 3 countries, the statistics point to at least 1 million Iraqi deaths, 220,000 Afghans, and 80,000 dead in Pakistan.
But what I would say, inshallah,
I would say he gets funded by them, I think.
Sorry?
I would say he gets funded by
this is what I'm saying, this kind of talk. But anyway, let me just finish.
He has extreme views, yeah?
Let me just finish, yeah? Obviously, let me just finish, yeah? Anyway, basically, yeah, if anyone wants to talk about any particular Muslim, whoever it is, yeah, alhamdulillah, for example, like Andrew Chowdhury, for example, alhamdulillah, he's going to be released in later this year. You can question him, alhamdulillah. Go up to him and question him. Don't ask me about